we're about here is the rich feeling that joy and grief are not strangers, but they're intimately connected in our experiences. And Rachel, being a courageous, brave, and amazing woman, a newly licensed minister, a phenomenal friend and companion, and she also happens to head up the Next Gen retreat that she and her son Dominic are rocking, is going to share something about grief today that's not there to in any way break us, but build us and connect us. And through her amazing experiences in her life, and her children are here with us today, she's going to stand before you and openly share the power of what grief can do in a person's life. So I welcome the wonderful Reverend Rachel.
See if I can fit my water up here. Yeah. Well, good morning. I'll put it down here. Good morning, Tacoma CSL. I love this community. You are all so open and just willing to go deep and talk about whatever needs being talked about. There's no BS. I love it. It's really great. Is the mic okay? Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So we have a saying in the ministry community, we shouldn't work our stuff out on the platform. And I understand the wisdom in that. I understand the wisdom of that. The platform shouldn't become therapy for our stuff. But I think it's not about how deep we're going personally, but how we are talking about about our personal things, because it's so important for ministers to talk about their personal stuff, because we're all just people. We just happen to have gone to school and we get up here and talk and do other things. But really, it's we're all equal, we're all the same, and it makes the teaching so much deeper. So let's dive right in. I am right now, as we speak, grieving before you. My husband, the father of my children, who are both here, died 2 months ago this week. And it feels really raw to talk about, but it also feels like the only way I can stand up here authentically before you today. And so I just decided to jump in and do it. My grief is always present. Whether I'm sobbing alone in my car, laughing at remembering his brilliant sense of humor, or just doing chores and not thinking about him at all. It's always there. I've been thinking a lot about grief lately, about the context it gives my life, about making something make sense that's so painful. My cousin, Rabbi Jeff, told me something last month that really resonated with me. He was having a talk with one of his congregants, and she brought up this idea of grief being rooms, and there could be a joy in one room and sadness or grief in another room. And she talked about how a person can wander as needed into these rooms. And it really, really stuck with me, and I just thought of the grief house. And that is what I'm going to talk about, the grief house. And that these areas and feelings and emotions and experiences we have during grief are rooms in this house. It's a strange house. No one plans to live there. No one wants to live there, really. We arrive without a map, suddenly sometimes, carrying only the pieces of the life we thought that we were going to have. And at first, the rooms feel really unfamiliar and cold. The hallways echo. The furniture of our old identity no longer fits quite the same way. Some days we find ourselves in the room of sorrow, where even breathing feels really heavy. And sometimes we wander into anger, numbness, memory, longing. And just when we think we know the layout of the house, a new door opens. It might hold loneliness, but it also might hold joy. It might be a room of unexpected love from friends and family. I imagine one of the rooms as a sunroom with plants and maybe a little pond. This one is the peace room. At the center of the grief house is a common area where you might interact with people in your life, your church, your community, your family, your friends. This is where community gathers in the house. This is the foundation of support. What was confusing for me at first about my grief was that I wasn't gutted 24 hours a day as I thought I might be. I realized that while I'm in the grief house, I can wander from sadness room over to the relief or numbness room and back again. It's not linear. It's not a series of steps or phases. We can feel anger for a time and then feel peace for a period. So grief around death is pretty well known to us. It's familiar to most of us. We miss someone, we're confused, it doesn't seem fair, it feels like there's a hole in our heart. This is a familiar concept. But there is other loss also to consider. There can be a loss of a relationship, a job, a way of being. I've lost a couple of jobs in my life, and maybe you have too. When it happens, I'm grieving what has been, even if maybe I didn't like the job, but it's still something that is lost. It's change, it's different. There's a loss of the people I worked with, the money I made, a routine. So, and even joyful change can bring some grief or loss, because that doesn't mean the change is necessarily bad or negative. You know, marriage is a joyful event full of love and promise and potential, and yet something is being left behind, whether it's a way of being, an independence, a particular home you lived in. And so it's not saying, well, that's loss that's, negative, but it's recognizing there's change, there's big change happening, and releasing that in order to move forward. So the grief house applies to both big life changes and really grief from losing a loved one. People resist change largely because some part of us no longer knows who we are. Both grief and life changes force a period of adjusting to like a new normal. We are required to build new routines, reevaluate our priorities, and learn to navigate a landscape that feels different. Neither process follows a straight line. And both of these changes can trigger fatigue, brain fog, anxiety. I know I have not felt like I can think straight for a couple of months. Both grief and profound change fundamentally reshape who you are. I have found I simply cannot go back to the way things were. Instead, this experience that I'm living requires me to integrate new realities into my perception of my life. So how to move through this grief and this loss with grace? One way is to name what has been lost, because every single detail matters in understanding how you've been impacted. When I lost my job last year, a job I really loved, I journaled about my grief. I had worked with some of these people for 6 years, and many were very good friends. I felt needed and valued, and it had tied up a lot of my identity in this job. It provided financial abundance for my family and a sense of routine. Writing about this was helpful for me to release that and move forward. Another thing about grieving is to allow yourself to feel. Sadness is really uncomfortable, and deep sorrow can be very scary. But healing cannot come until you face your pain. I lost my father when I was 16 years old. I didn't shed a tear or feel anything for about a year. I was just numb, completely numb. And after some therapy, and when I was ready and began processing my pain, I was finally able to heal. Also, another thing is to consider something you might want to do to honor your pain or what has been lost. My husband worked in the film industry, and his number one passion was film. He watched certain movies over and over and over again. My son, Dominic, came up with the wonderful idea that he, his sister, and I would make a list of all Dan's favorite films, and there are, 50 films on that list? More? Yeah. And we are watching all of them together, again. So, yeah. And it's been a true delight to honor my husband with this ritual. It's brought many, many tears and laughter. It's just been a really, really awesome experience. Grief can often be surprising and strike us when we're most vulnerable. A smell, a taste, a word, a song, can bring, can bring with it a flood of thoughts and emotions that require us to stop and honor what's happening and know that it's okay. That's how it works. That's how grief works. It's an ongoing, unpredictable process. Author Corrine Lahn says in her book, The Art of Grieving, we often think of grief as merely an emotional response to loss. However, it has many different layers. Grief affects us physically, mentally, and spiritually, and has social, cultural, and even philosophical and psychological implications that unfortunately are very often overlooked or cast aside. Grief affects individuals on many, many levels, and we are often bewildered about how to deal with our own grief, let alone someone else's. Grief is as unique to an individual as are their fingerprints. It is a natural process that is the result of loving deeply. We grieve because love is our natural blueprint. It can be a lifelong process, and there is not a right or wrong way to do it. There is no quick fix magic formula to end grief. It becomes a part of you. Well, we know that grief is unique to each person in each situation. It can be experienced in so many ways, and it comes in waves. But I think maybe the grief itself is not what's coming in waves. The grief itself is the experience of loss that is always present like a container. What comes in waves are the feelings, a tsunami of sorrow, hysterical laughter, joy, sadness, numbness, anger, relief. Grief is a direct reflection and parallel to love. Love is messy and brings with it waves of different feelings. It's always there, like a container, and we experience it as a variety of emotions: passion, caring, adoration, annoyance, anger, jealousy, fulfillment. Knowing this helps me understand my own grief more clearly. Quoting Dr. Alan Wolfelt, you see, love and grief are two sides of the same precious coin. One does not and cannot exist without the other. They are the yin and yang of our lives. Grief is predicated on our capacity to give and receive love. Some people choose not to love, and so they never grieve. If we allow ourselves the grace that comes with love, however, we must allow ourselves the grace that is required to mourn. As Wolfert says, grief is love, and love is grief. And just as grief is messy and zigzaggy, often so is love. For me, acknowledging this and really accepting it has been a healing process in itself. I would say my marriage was pretty messy sometimes. So our relationship wasn't perfect. We hurt each other. There was deep, deep love, and there was pain. Both of those things were real at the same time. People seem to want grief to be simple. Either the person was good to you and you miss them, or they weren't and you're relieved they're gone. That grief does not fit in for me. I don't fit in that box. I grieve the person he was when he tried. I grieve the future we were never able to experience together. I grieve the apologies that came too late, and I'm angry at the disease that changed our lives. I keep replaying moments in my head, wondering how someone could be both a source of comfort and a source of pain, and then be gone forever, leaving me to hold both truths simultaneously. Some days I cry because I miss him. Some days I cry because I'm angry. Some days I cry because I'm relieved, and then I feel guilty for that relief. If your grief over a person or a change feels messy, please know you are not broken. Loving someone imperfectly doesn't disqualify your sorrow. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you've stopped caring. And missing someone doesn't mean you forgot why things are hard. There's so many lessons for me as I walk this path. I think the aha that stands out the most, has the most impact for me, is acceptance. Acceptance that love, life, grief, and change are often messy. Acceptance that I am doing the best that I can with what I know, always. and the deep knowledge that after all is said and done, there is only love. The Grief House is a living sanctuary of transformation. Every room was built because we dared to love. Every hallway exists because our hearts were larger than we imagined. And though grief reminds us of our humanness, our tenderness, our fragility, our impermanence, the house itself is built by something holy. Spirit, the great architect. Spirit does not rush through the rooms. Spirit simply keeps expanding the house so there is space enough for all of it. The heartbreak and the healing, the memory and the becoming, the tears and the awakening. And perhaps grace looks like this, not escaping the house, but learning that we never wander it alone. And maybe grace looks like allowing joy to coexist with our experience of grief. So life coach Terry Connellan says, this year has been full of learning to live in paradox and seeing joy as a kind of oxygen. This learning set the tone of the first quarter of the year as I moved through the deep grief of losing my mother. As people who have been there well know, it's a defining moment in your life. At the same time, I also experienced my job being deleted and becoming redundant in February. So there were layers of different kinds of grief I was working through all at the same time. I learned it was okay to feel joy. Celebrating the joy of my mother's beautiful life, the strength that lives on in me, my female ancestry and lineage, her loving kindness, and knowing she was cheering me on, as always, as I moved into a new phase of life. All of these qualities and the simple pleasures of water, light, tea, sun, reading, swimming, friends and family helped me navigate much at this time. Grief and joy can coexist. By weaving one with the other, the passage through it is deeply felt, but somehow more sure-footed and grounded. Being able to smile and embrace the full gamut of emotions simultaneously is a wholehearted learning joy has taught me. So she is right, joy and grief can coexist. And this paradox, as she says, provide building blocks for new beginnings. I'd like to leave you with a story about a wildfire. At first glance, everything appeared ruined. The trees were blackened, the landscape looked lifeless. Animals had fled. Nothing resembled the forest that once stood there. And yet, beneath the surface, something extraordinary was already happening. Certain pine cones, lodgepole pines, are actually designed for fire. Their cones are sealed shut with resin and only release their seeds under extreme heat. What looked like destruction was also an opening. What appeared to be ending was simultaneously becoming a beginning. Weeks later, tiny green shoots began emerging from the ash. I think life can feel like that sometimes. A divorce burns through the future we imagined. A layoff scorches our sense of identity. A move uproots us from familiarity. A death leaves entire rooms inside us empty and echoing. And in those moments, we stand in the ashes and wonder if anything beautiful can come from this. But Spirit knows something we often forget. There are seeds in us that only open under certain conditions. There are depths of compassion we do not discover until heartbreak. There are forms of courage we don't meet until uncertainty. There are new identities, new communities, new callings, and new ways of loving that can emerge only after the old landscape changes. That doesn't mean we glorify suffering. We don't. It means we trust that no season of life is wasted. The grief house, the house of change itself, is not evidence that life has abandoned us. It is evidence that we are still growing, still becoming, still alive. And perhaps grace is realizing that Spirit never stops building. I think that change, really big life changes, are a part of being human. And to remember to be gentle with yourself, to listen to your intuition, which is, after all, Spirit. And to accept yourself and your process without judgment. If we can learn these simple life lessons of being gentle, following intuition, and accepting ourselves during grief, change, or loss, Can we take these truths into every area of our life? If we can practice them even some of the time, imagine how much more grounded and full of grace our lives might be. The grief house reminds us of our humanness, but it is built by our sacredness. Spirit is the container, the great architect that makes space for our feelings, our growth, and our development as deep spiritual beings in human form. Let's pray. Just being present right here in this moment, I am recognizing, knowing, and feeling the alignment and presence of Spirit in this room with every single person here, everyone online, everyone who ever watches this video, knowing that it's always present, it's always available. It is the life spark, the source, the intelligent, the cause. It is absolutely good and very good. And I am just want to express gratefulness and gratitude and thanksgiving for being here and for the community that has been created in this room and for the love that I am feeling right now from every single person present. And I am so grateful to be able to be here to share my truth with all of you. And so I know that everyone's week is filled with joy and with love and with expansion. And I release this word into the divine law of consciousness, knowing that it is already done. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.